Hello everybody, how's it going? Welcome back to HTML5 website design tutorial. So in this tutorial today, we're going to be going over forms and how to make them. So forms are used for many purposes all over the web. They are used by search engines to accept keywords and by online stores to process e-commerce shopping carts. Websites use forms to help with a variety of functions, including accepting visitor feedback, encouraging visitors to send a news story to a friend or colleague, collecting email addresses for a newsletter, and accepting order information. This part we're going to do next introduces forms. And what I have to say before we get started is we are creating the front end part of the form. So when you come to websites, you got a front end and a back end, a client and a server, what we talked about earlier in the introduction. So we're going to be making the form that people actually see on the screen. Now it's not actually going to do anything because when I enter in information and I click a button, what's happening in the background is happening in the background. So that would include scripting, server-side languages like PHP, Node.js, things like that are going to handle something like that. So just know we are making a form, but it is for a static website. It is not the PHP part. It is just the HTML and CSS front end part of the form. Okay, great. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. I got a little sample HTML code up here to get us started. Okay, so to start and end a form, you're going to use the form element. So it's just like this right here, form, whoops, and that's that. Alrighty, so now we need to add some attributes, and I'm going to talk about each one after I get done typing them. So name, order, method equals post, ID equals order. Okay, so we got quite a few of them in here, so I'm going to talk about them one by one. All right, the first attribute, which is action, right down here, the value is the URL or file/name path of server-side processing script. So when someone enters in some information on a form and they hit a button to go, what makes that button work and what makes that information either go into a database or come out of a database is a scripting language or program of some sort that makes that happen. So this is required. It indicates where to send the form information when the form is submitted. Okay, so the next one would be ID. And this one is optional. You don't have to include it, but it provides a unique identifier for the form. And this is something more that you would learn as you learn PHP. But so for our purposes, neither one of these are really going to do much for us, but you have to have this one, the action one. Okay, so the next attribute I'm going to talk about is the method right here. And get is the default value. The value of get causes the form data to be appended to the URL and sent to the web server. Now, what we have in there is post. The post method is more private and transmits the form data in the body of the HTTP response. This method is preferred by the W3C. Okay. And then name. This one is also optional. It's an optional attribute. But yeah, so let's go ahead and get started with the actual form itself. I'm going to make a little email text box real quick. So email. All right. Input type equals text. Alrighty, so as you can see, we just included what is necessary. And let's go ahead and save this and preview it in our Komodo tab. Great. So as you can see here, we have a little text box. It says email. Perfect. All right, so there are several attributes that we could have. We only have 3 of them right here. But just to name off some, just so you guys can hear some other ones. There's one called tab index. It configures the tab order of the form control required. And I'll show you that one in a second. There's autocomplete. There is disabled. The form control is disabled. That's the purpose of that one. Max length, it configures the max length of data accepted. So that's another attribute you could use to make sure someone doesn't enter in like, 1,000 characters or something crazy like that. There is size. You can change the size of the box. ID, we use that one. We already talked about it. But there's several of them. So let's go ahead and do the required attribute. Let's add it on here just so you guys can see how easy it is to add more attributes. Required equals required. Go ahead and save this and preview. Yeah, so if there was a button and we try to submit, then it wouldn't work because this field is required to continue. Okay, so now we're going to talk about submit buttons and reset buttons. So a submit button is a form control used to submit a form. So it's input type equals submit, and a reset button is simply the same thing, but with reset as the type. Let's go ahead and preview this one. So as you can see, there's the default value submit query and reset, and those buttons right there. So if I wanted to change the value, let's say I wanted to say go or something silly like that. Save and preview. Whoops. I got to do value equals go. Yeah, and as you can see now, it says go. So go is probably not the best option, but maybe you could do something like sign me up. That'd be good, something to put in there. Okay, great. So now we're going to go over checkboxes, and a checkbox is something that allows someone to select one or more predetermined items on the screen. So we're going to go ahead and work on a checkbox. So I'm going to go ahead and put a little line break right here. Preview one more time. Yeah, so those are underneath, which is good. So underneath this, I'm going to put another line break. So we're going to create a checkbox. Okay, so I'm going to do a little H2 element. Sample checkbox. Alrighty. Okay, so input type equals checkbox. Name equals IE. Okay, so let's go ahead and do the next one. And I forgot to mention, you have to put the actual text that we're going to see next to the checkbox. So Internet Explorer. And then put a little line break here. You'll see why when we're done. So this one would be, whoops. Firefox. And let's do one more. Input type equals checkbox. Name equals Opera. And value equals yes. And you notice all these say value equals yes. So you can click them and they stay checked. And let's go ahead and test this. So command save, preview, and look at that. I could check all of them, or I could check two of them, or one of them, and it stays there. And if you notice why that happens is because we have the attribute value set to yes. So the attribute assigns a value to the checkbox that is triggered when the checkbox is clicked. And a radio button, instead of being square checkboxes, these are circles and you can only pick one of them. Okay, great. So as you can see, we have input type equals radio. The name attribute right here is it names the form element so it can be easily accessed by client-side scripting languages such as JavaScript or by server-side processing such as PHP. And the name should be unique. And if you notice, they all have the same name, which helps group them together. So when you click one, you can only click one. And the ID attribute right here provides a unique identifier for the form element. And if you notice, they're all different. And then value attribute assigns the value to the radio button that is triggered when the radio button is selected. And this should definitely be a unique value for each radio button in the group. And the value can be accessed by client-side or server-side processing. So let's go ahead and save this and preview it. And there we go. So we have circular buttons. And if you notice, we can only click one. We can't click all of them because you can only select one choice for radio. And let's go ahead and change the name of these and see what happens. So this is Fave Browser. Let's put Fave Browser 1, make it different, and then 2. So if we save this, I can click all three of them if I wanted, right? So that's why when they have the same name, that you can only click one of them. And there's other attributes you could use as well for this. You could use several of them, and there's a whole list of them. And if you're wanting to do something specific, it's one of those things where you can Google and literally find out what you need to do, what attribute you need to include in like 2 seconds. Okay, great. So now we're going to go over hidden input control, which will store text or numeric information, but it's not visible through the browser. So that would be something like a password. So let's make a simple password box. So we're going to go ahead and get rid of that right there and give us a few lines. H2 simple password box. Input type equals password. Name equals P word. ID equals P word. Great. Let's go ahead and save this right here and open it up. And there we go. So if I type stuff in here, you notice it's a bunch of little dots. Okay, so if I type something in here, I could see it. If I type something in here, I could not. So that's another cool little feature you can do. Now we're going to go over a scrolling text box area. So I'm going to do another H2 element. Scrolling text box. Okay, so usually you'll want to say what this is and then make a new line. So this one is going to use the text area element, and it configures a scrolling text box. So the name is comments, ID equals comments. Okay, and now you could say the size. So we're going to do 40 for columns, and for rows we're going to do 2, and inside enter your comments here. We're going to save, and we're going to go ahead and view it. Great. So what happened here? Let's go ahead, if you put it right after it and save and refresh, there we go. So enter your comments here, and then we can enter in whatever comments we have into the text box. And there's several different attributes you could use for that. You could use a placeholder, required, like a required comment. You can do disabled, max length. Yeah, so rows and columns are both required. And if they're not there, then the browser will do its default for both of them. Okay, so the next one we're going to go over is the option element, and this contains and configures an option item displayed in the select list form control. So the option tag denotes the beginning of an option item. So that's what we're going to do next. So let's get a little space here. Okay, so if you notice, I did a select element right there, and this element contains and configures the select list form control. The select tag denotes the beginning of a select list, and this is used include for several things: a select box, a drop-down list, a drop-down box, and an option box. So this size attribute we got here configures the number of choices the browser will display. If set to 1, the element functions as a drop-down list, which is what we're going to do. So that's why I have it set to 1. The name, same as all the other things we've been doing so far with forms. Same attribute. We're going to give this one fave browser. Okay. And ID equals fave browser. Great. So now within there, we're going to do the option element. And then within there, select your favorite browser. Now we're going to have some option values. So option value equals Internet Explorer. Okay, great. So we have all of our options here. I'm going to do Command Save and preview it. So let's see what it looks like. It says right here, select your favorite browser. So that was what we have in the option tags. And then we open that up, and we can see all of our options that we have here. I can click Opera, and there we go. I selected Opera. So that's how that one works. Okay, and we could also use images for buttons as well, which is a very popular choice since a lot of people want to have very nice graphics for their projects. So they don't want to just have a regular text login button. They might want something that looks a little bit nicer. So I'm going to go ahead and get one of those real quick. Okay, great. So as you guys can see, I just got a little login PNG, and it has no background. It has no black background, no white background. It is just the button itself. And so I'm going to use that now as a login image button. So we're going to open back up our project here, and at the bottom, we're going to do input type equals image, and I'm going to put some spaces in here so we can get this to the middle of the screen. Image src stands for source. It is going to be logo.png, and I don't have to worry about all these different slashes and folders and all this stuff because it is in the same folder. So I could just give the name of it right there. If it was in a folder nested before or after, you have to mess around with the slashes in the folder names, and I'll show that in another video. And alt for the alternate text, it's going to put login button. So let's go ahead and save this right here in preview. And as you can see, it's messed up because I put logo instead of login. And we're going to save, and there it is. And as you can see, if I hover my mouse over it, it's clickable. So obviously there's no PHP found, so nothing's going to come up, but there it is. So mouse, it's clickable, and it's pretty big. So I would have to probably find a smaller one or make the size smaller. But for our purposes, it's doing pretty good for now. So another way to add more interest to a form is not only to use an image button, but the button element, which can be used to configure not only images, but also blocks of text as the selectable area that can submit a reset or reset a form. So we're just going to use the button element. So we're going to do that next. So I'm going to go ahead and get rid of everything we have so far. I'm going to close this. Okay, I'm going to get rid of this as well. So now we're going to do the button element. So button type equals submit. It could be reset image source equals login.png. Width equals, let's say, 80. And a height equals, say, 30. Alt sign up for more updates. Save and preview. There it is, the little login button. And as you can see, it is one button itself. So I'm going to get rid of that. Now we're going to go over a new element called the label element. And the label element is a container tag that associates a text description with a form control. So this is something often used. So I'm going to go ahead and get rid of everything on the screen now. And we're going to go ahead and make a label. Label for email then right after it, it's going to say input type equals text, name equals email, ID equals email. And notice that the for attribute, I need an equal sign there, on the label is the value that is the same as the ID attribute on the input right here. And this creates an association between the text label and the form control. The input element uses both the input element uses both the name and ID attributes for different purposes. The name attribute can be used by client-side scripting and server-side processing. The ID attribute creates an identifier that can be used by the label element, anchor element, and CSS selectors. So we're going to go ahead and save this in preview. And there we go. These two are associated with one another. Okay, and so now we're going to do something else that is really common called the field set and legend elements. A technique that can be used to create a more visually pleasing form is to group elements of a similar purpose together using the field set element, which will cause the browser to render a visual cue, such as an outline or a border around the form elements grouped together within a field set. The legend element provides a text description for the field set grouping. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to get rid of this right here, and we're going to make a common contact us form. So field set, legend, contact us. And now I'm just going to have some labels with some information that I think is pretty common for a contact us page. Okay, so I got the first one down. I'm gonna put 2 line breaks, and just trust me on this. I'll make it look a lot better. Now I'm gonna go ahead and put a last name and email label as well. So I'm gonna just copy these, paste, paste. So last name. And remember, we can name this stuff whatever we really want. When it comes to name and ID, this is more for database stuff. Email. It's good to put a little dash right there. So if you notice, all these have the same type. It is text. So I'm going to make this one email. And this one email as well. So let's go ahead and save this and see how it looks. And there we are. So the field set created a little border for us. The legend is this little contact us in the middle of the border. And we have first name with a box associated for last name and email. So this is a nice, simple contact form that you would see somewhere. Another trick I wanted to show you guys was the tab index attribute. So some of your visitors might have difficulty using a mouse, and they might hit tab to go from section to section, and that's something I actually do myself. So for right now, if I hit tab, it does work. The default is to go from one form control to the next. So I hit tab, tab, tab. But let's say, for instance, for some reason, for the sake of the form, let's say there was other things on the page that it was going to, not these. Let's say I had a bunch of little links and other stuff it was going to, like way over here. Then I could use something called the tab index attribute. So all I would do is in the input element, I would have an attribute called tab index equal to 1. And then the next one it would go to would be 2. So let's say I want to skip last name and go straight to here. And I gave this a value of 2. And I save this and we preview. So I'm in the first one, I hit tab and it goes all the way to the last one. So that's something good to know. Okay, so now I'm going to show you guys how to style a form. And the old-fashioned way is to put everything in a table, but people don't really do that anymore because it is old-fashioned. So what we're going to do now is create a new form, and everything's going to be linked together, and we're going to have some CSS. So as you can see in this top here, I'm going to put, sample.css. That's what I'm going to link to up here, sample, same folder. Okay, so in my body, I'm going to make a form. Okay guys, so I finished the HTML. I'm going to go ahead and save this, and we're going to look at it before. So that's what it looks like now. So obviously not very visually appealing. So we're going to do some CSS now and make it look better. So for the CSS, we're going to have form, which is the element. We're going to be styling background color. So I've got a background color, font, family, Arial, sans serif, width equals 350 pixels, and padding, I'm going to do 10 pixels all around. Great. So now we're going to do the label element. So to style the label element, we just address it directly, label, float, left, width 100 pixels, display, block, and what that does is put everything in the same line. The label clear, left, text line, right, padding right. Let's go 10 pixels, and margin top. so things aren't all clumped together. Let's go 10 pixels. Great. So now we're going to address both the input and text area. So you just do a comma, and this styling will affect both of those. Margin, top, let's go 10 pixels, and display block. All right, great. So now we have an ID called mySubmit. So we're going to do hashtag mySubmit for ID and margin left 110 pixels. Okay, great. So we're going to go ahead and save this and view it now and see what this looks like. Oh, got 2 errors. So let's see, jump. So margin, top. Whoops. So right here, as you can see, I have a little dash there. So let's see what else. Now I have one more. Clear, and I misspelled left. So this is the nice thing about having a good text editor as opposed to having, just Notepad. So we're going to preview this, and look at that. It looks great. Everything's nice in line, easy, visually appealing. So yeah, so that's pretty much it when it comes to forms. So now I'm going to kind of explain more about the server-side processing. So what we've done so far is created the client side. So your web browser requests web pages and the related files from a web server. The web server locates the files and sends them to your web browser. Then the web browser renders the returned files and displays the requested web pages. Sometimes a website needs more functionality than static web pages, possibly a site search, order form, email list, database display, or other type of interactive dynamic processing. This is where server-side processing is needed. Early web servers use a protocol called Common Gateway Interface to provide this functionality. CGI is a protocol or standard method for a web server to pass a web page's user request, which is typically initiated through the use of a form. Server-side scripting is a technology by which a server-side script is run on a web server to dynamically generate web pages. Examples of server-side scripting technologies include PHP, Ruby on Rails, Microsoft Active Server Pages, Adobe Cold Fusion, Sun Java Server Pages, and Microsoft.NET Server Scripting. Server scripting differs from the old school way, which was called Common Gateway Interface, because it uses something called direct execution. The script is either run either by the web server itself or by an extension module in the web server. Okay, so just a few more tricks. So let's say, for instance, I want only an email address to be entered in email. I don't want anything else. So then all I would do is you can Google, email address input for forms, CSS or HTML or something like that. It would be HTML. But for this one, let's find email. So where is it? Email. Here we go. So type, I have text, which is fine, but then anyone can enter in any kind of text they want. So if I put email, which is what you could use for the type attribute, then it would only accept email addresses. A little pop-up would come up and say, please enter a valid email address. Likewise, if I wanted only a URL, only a link, I could put URL, okay? And if I wanted only a phone number, it'd be TEL. And if I wanted to make a search box for searching, look at something, a search term, it would be search. Okay, so those are the different types that you could do additionally besides text for labels.
Thank you for watching. Please leave a comment and like the video if you enjoyed. Subscribe for future video notifications. Feel free to donate by clicking the PayPal donation link below in the description. Visit our website at freecomputerhelp.net for programming tips, installation guides, and more.